Toss it outside left. Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
And off Berry. Skirts to the left side. Breaks the tackle. And he will take it in. Touchdown.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. That's what I'm talking about. It is caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown. Oh, baby, what a play that time. Aiden Hutchinson read that and blew it up. Big time stand by that defense.
Beautiful Lions fans of planet Earth, welcome to Lions Gray Manes podcast. My name is Chris Stone. I'm at castahead.net. And that gentleman on the right side of your screen, he is fresh back from the Lions' victory from Ford Field over the Cleveland Browns. Dr. Brent Kreider, DBC. Wow, is everything just tasting better this week? Are we back? Are we back to what we were last season?
I think we're well on the path of being better than last season, to be honest with you.
All right.
There is a whole level of maturity, motivation, and the players, the coaches, the back office are mature and motivated to make this the best Detroit Lions team ever. And what happened in the playoffs last year and losing the opening game to the Green Bay Packers has this team focused.
Wow.
And the Lions are elite and on all three groups, offense, defense, and special teams. We'll talk about that later in detail about why.
Did you use the E word? You used the E word, man. We're elite all of a sudden. Yeah, I mean, it certainly feels like, Brent, that week one was an anomaly. That was just like, and everyone overreacts, as everyone always does. Like, we lost Ben Johnson, we lost Aaron Glenn. This team's screwed. It's, they were using the SOL word, which we don't use on this show. And all of a sudden, the sky was falling. And you, my friend, the chief intelligence officer of Lions Optimism, said, "Hey, we're good. We're good. We start slow. This is okay." And I got to say, you were right. And, but I think we got to break down this victory because it was a different kind of win for us, right, Brent? I mean, it wasn't, if you look at the score and you look at the box score and you say, okay, 34-10, this team just steamrolled the Browns. But if you watched the game, it certainly didn't feel like it. It felt like the runs were not coming. Demo was not, working out, and Jameer had a couple of great runs and a touchdown. But it was some tough sledding. Certainly the Browns defense was good, but in the end, I think the special teams touchdown from Cleveland, special teams overall, I thought really took a step forward, which I was super happy to see, because special teams, in my opinion, in the first couple of weeks, not so bueno. But Brent, talk about the win and what some takeaways were from the 34-10 win over the Browns.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you some numbers, right?
Okay, let's do it.
It's not all about the numbers, but the Browns had a total of 249 yards offense. They had a drive of 88 yards and another drive of 46 yards, and in 14 drives, the Lions held them to 115 total yards. That's 8.2 yards per drive. That is elite football on the defensive side. And Aiden talked about in the post game the fact that the Lions need to clean up their opening drive. But
opening drive, right? Thank you for bringing that up. Like, let's just pull the opening drive out of every game so far, and then all of a sudden we do have an elite defense, right?
That's right, because 88 of those 240 something yards were on that opening drive, and then after that, you had one other drive there. And look, the reality is that when you can hold a team to 8.2 yards per drive for 14 drives, you're going to win a lot of football games. Even if the Lions didn't have a really good offense, you're going to win a lot of football games. So offensively, the good news is, and in the back office, we were talking about this earlier with Mike T and Dan Keener about how the defense really has to step up. We'll get into the injuries and depth issues in the secondary later, but to this point, the Lions defense has really stepped up in each game and played better and better and better. Now the Browns offense is terrible. We're going to see a worse offense this week, I think, in the Cincinnati Bengals. But we can fully expect that this defense is going to continue to get better. We called this out 2 weeks ago, and then again last week. Our linebacking core is elite, and when you can hold up on the defensive front and maintain that gap integrity, and time again, I saw them the defensive front hold up and let linebackers run and make plays. And when you force a team to become one-dimensional, like the Lions have forced teams to do, and then what happens when they drop back to pass? We've got pressure on the quarterback, despite all of the calls to sign people for $9 million as a rental defensive end. The Lions avoided doing that, and we have found ourselves putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And I fully expect that to continue this week. I actually feel terrible for the Bengals quarterback, Jake Browning, because I think that the defensive front is going to really put a lot of pressure on him. Their offensive line is a mess. On graymains.com, Dan Keener posted one of the snapshots of the offensive line, 4 guys blocking one person. And so if the Bengals make the mistake of doing that this week, they're going to get trounced by the Lions. And so I feel really good about the state of the defense, other than the injuries.
Yeah.
And I think later we're gonna go into that. So special teams you brought up, right?
Yep.
Special teams coverage still causes me a little bit of concern. It's the new kickoff rules.
Kickoff coverage. Yeah.
Yeah, teams are ending up on the 30-something yard line, which I think we're in the bottom tier of teams in terms of giving up our opposition.
Feels like we're figuring it out still, right?
I think we're still figuring it out. And then I think we all saw Khalif, fighting for receiving the ball on the kick return. So there's plenty of things. And what Dan Campbell is the best at is we got a lot of things to clean up. You won 34-10. You took the number one defense in the NFL kind of to the woodshed, and were physically imposing themselves on that Cleveland Browns defense at various points. The Browns defense is really strong. They've got a fantastic front seven, but what you saw from the Lions is continuing to be disciplined and running the football. And that opens up the play action pass, and we really thrive in the play action pass when you do that. So all elements of the Lions offense, defense, and special teams. And look, the criticisms, we're talking about polishing a diamond here. We're not turning a lump of coal into a diamond. We're talking about levels of greatness. The ESPN Power Poll has the Lions at number 3 overall. And that's simply because we all know how those are. Those are like beauty contests. And when you put Philadelphia as number 1, 4-0, and they continue to look terrible in many aspects of the game, they almost let Tampa come back on them last week. And so Philadelphia has a lot to clean up, a lot more than the Lions. And I would argue, just because of the record and that opening day loss at Green Bay, that the Lions aren't arguably number 1. And Buffalo's got the easiest schedule in the NFL. I have rarely seen a number 1 seed with such an easy schedule. The winning percentage of the teams that they're playing is very low. Yeah. And so, the Lions have played it looked much tougher in the preseason as we were going into this, with Cincinnati losing Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson playing like he's played. But you put that schedule out at the beginning of the year, and I think everybody is of the opinion that the Lions had really tough road to hoe to get to the point where you're 3-1 and in first place through 4 games.
Yeah, and I think when I'm looking at the Browns game and all the talk that was happening beforehand, and obviously Morton basically said, hey, you haven't seen a run game like us yet. And of course, there was a lot of talk afterwards from that team. I'm like, hey, thanks for giving him bulletin board material, John, but and of course, they're going to run their mouths, and that's what players do, and I would expect them to do that. That's what they're going to do. But we were the first team to rush for over 100 yards versus the Browns. Take nothing away from the Cleveland Browns. Take nothing away from Jim Schwartz and his ability he's a great defensive coordinator. Not a great head coach for us, anyway. I digress. But what I really loved about it was the fact that, we have two really great running backs, and you just kind of put one in and you put the other in, and you kind of see where those successes are. And, you would thought at the beginning of the game, okay, this is a tough game. This is against a tough defensive line, right? This is a David Montgomery game, right? No, this was not a David Montgomery game. We couldn't get him going. It felt like every David Montgomery carry was cogging down, and Jahmyr Gibbs was having some success because he could work himself outside. You saw that for the touchdown. You saw him work off of other blocks for the few long gains that he had. So, but I like the fact that this team is doing that, and it's not depending on one running back, one sort of scheme. Myles Garrett was contained. He didn't have any sacks, but he did have some pressures. We saw that. We saw some QB hits there. That knocked Goff off with his timing. Goff, not his best game. I mean, if we're being honest, right? And there seemed to be, many times where him and J-Mo were not on the same page. And some of that was Goff's fault, and he fell on the sword on that. But I think there's some blame to go around there as well. You're gonna get games like that from J-Mo. Don't you feel like every once in a while there were some games like that last season before, where you're going to get that kind of thing where it just is like he's not squeezing the ball. There's some plays where he's not able to go back and forth over each shoulder. I think we're going to hopefully get that, fixed in some way, shape, or form. I'm picking nits, for the most part, but like these are things like if you're showing up against another team that has a good defense, but also has a really good offense. Cleveland does not, obviously. So, if we're playing Philadelphia and we've got those issues, is that the difference between a win and a loss? So we've got to clean that stuff up. But I do love how the running game is not sort of contingent on one particular running back. Like against Baltimore, it was a demo game, obviously, right? But Jahmyr was the feature back, Brent on Sunday, and I thought he did a really good job of doing what he could. I was getting a little tired of the 1 yard or the 2 yard run, but then all of a sudden he's busting it for some gains. Before we roll to the next one here, Brent, I just wanted to make mention, folks, the chat is open. So if you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, X, all the places, join us. Wanda Rich is joining us. She says it's sounding better every show, and she loves it. So listen, Wanda, thank you for joining us. Please hit subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you haven't already, we appreciate you joining us, Wanda. And we've got our Gray Mains joining us backstage, and we'll be pulling Dan on later. And he's saying Miami is trash and worse off with losing Hill. I don't know where that came from, but I it's you're not wrong with that one for sure. And
what does that say about the Jets?
Right. Yes. Exactly. But I think when we talk about
Buffalo's competition, I think he was saying that because I mentioned
right.
Buffalo's schedule earlier.
Listen,
Chris, going back,
this game was not pretty. It really wasn't. But it ugly wins against elite defenses matter. This wasn't pretty, but it showed that grit, right? It showed that grit. Campbell showed up and said, he'd show up and Parcells would hang rat traps and mouse traps around in the locker room, before a trap game or whatever. He's like, we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that kind of stuff. These are professionals. We know how to do that. We've set the expectations here. We play every team hard in the same way. And we understand how important those things are. And the second that you say, oh, we're playing the Bengals and they don't have Joe Burrow and, whatever, is the second that team takes advantage of you. So I feel confident that these aren't the Lions of years past where you just kind of like, oh, how did we lose to that team? Right.
Yeah. Well, you again move so eloquently through the topics. One, if you're going to have JMO drop balls, have it in the Bengals game when you're winning 34-10, right? Two, last week in Baltimore, David Montgomery averaged I don't even know how many yards per carry because he had so many yards. 151 yards on 12 carries. And so you're averaging, 12 and a half, 13 yards per carry almost. And he wasn't the horse to ride this week. And to your point about, being selected, the Lions have so many weapons. And we talk about this every week. The Lions have so many weapons and can really, it's a matter of pick your poison. And a team can try to stop one particular player, and the Lions just can go to somebody else. You go to Amon-Ra, you go to our great tight end Laporta. You can roll Gibbs out there, you can roll Montgomery out there, you can hit JMO on trick plays, reverses, deep routes. Khalif has played well. I can't wait to see Tesla at some point step in and get some play. But the reality is that the Lions have a fantastic ability to pick up on what the team's trying to stop, and you just roll to plan B, C, D, E. And frankly, I think that's part of the game plan. We're going to probe them. We're going to test them out, and we're going to run particular our first scripted plays, and then we're going to make adjustments. And what I've been really impressed by is Morton's game management and the way that adjustments are made. One of the criticisms that we had of our defensive and offensive coordinators last year, when we were debating the finer points of winning 14 games in a row at one point, was the adjustments that they were not making at halftime. And I think it's when the games get tight at the end of the year in the playoffs, you're going to need those coaches making adjustments and taking advantage of what the other teams are going to give us. And so I'm really pleased with how the Lions have been making those adjustments. And you said this multiple times, and I agree 100%. And that is, I would rather the Lions win ugly than like the old days. Same old Lions. There's still a lot of people out there who are commiserating about how they're. You're
not supposed to say it, Brent. Don't say it. That should not I'm gonna.
These are not the same old Lions. I don't even know. They don't even resemble remotely the Lions of yesteryear. And I told somebody this weekend, at the game we were chatting, and I said, this Detroit Lions team, and I mean this sincerely, reminds me of the Steelers of the 70s, the 49ers, the Cowboys, in consecutive decades. This team is elite. And we all know that, we were 2 or 3 plays away from the Super Bowl 2 years ago, had a catastrophic first round exit last year. But this team is absolutely wired to win every game this year, continuing forward. I'll be shocked if we lose 2 or 3 games this year, the way they're playing right now. And with the focus that they have, and Campbell's motivation for them is to be the best version of themselves every week. And so, the Lions are going to come out. They're going to take care of business this week. And we'll all put up our predictions. I don't foresee anybody picking the Bengals over the Lions this week. And then the next 2 games against Kansas City and Tampa, you're going to see the Lions roll out there with in Kansas City, and then at home against Tampa. And that's where you're going to see what happened in Baltimore happen. They are going to play those teams very well. And we, even if we lose one of those, I would say that, from there on out, the Lions are going to be incredibly competitive to win as many games as anybody in the NFC. Truth be told, Philadelphia, if they continue to get lucky and squeak out games, but we saw 2 years ago, they lost 4 or 5 games in a row. Dan and Michael keep me straight on that. But they have the ability to absolutely lose quite a few games in a row, meaning that as long as we continue to win at the end of the year, we could be competitive for the best record in the NFC and the bye and the hosting. Most important thing, though, this team can go on the road and win. I'm not concerned if we lose a couple games during the season. Not looking too far ahead, but that Bengals game, we should take care of business. And then I'm really looking forward to those next two games and seeing what this team has.
I love it. I love how every week we end up talking about the future, but at the same time we're not going too far and too confidently in the future, because Brent, what we saw was injuries. And this is what happened. This was the bugaboo for us last season. And I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I'm a little bit scared of it, right? Because we saw this, but at the same time, like, look what Brad and Dan were able to do, piecing things together to get us to a 15-2 season. And then it just ran out for us in the first round, like you had mentioned, the catastrophic loss to the Commanders. But I think they learned from that, right? And I think they understand, like, when we get these guys hurt, and last year the case was the defense, and then this past weekend we had injuries, obviously to DJ Reed and also to Terrion Arnold. And so I think this is a good sort of segue into talking about what we're going to do at the cornerback position. And I do want to bring in Dan on this. So welcome, Dan, to the show. Dr. Keener, live from Ford Field, as I like to say. But let's talk about these injuries. I think for those that aren't paying attention, DJ Reed, obviously, I don't think the grade was given in terms of the severity of the hamstring strain. I'll refer to you, Dan, on that. I think it looks like if they're saying 4 to 5 weeks, I think we're looking at like a grade 2. So, that's probably what we're looking at. I mean, they're even talking about possibility of Terrion being back this weekend. Who knows? I mean, Terrion wasn't exactly playing outstanding, but is he going to be playing better than Ya-Sin or Khalil Dorsey at cornerback? I don't know. But I wanted to open up the discussion, Dan, to you and obviously to Brent as well. Should we expect that we're going to take a shot at a cornerback, maybe not necessarily this week or maybe the next couple of weeks? Doesn't feel like Brad Holmes style, but at least in the short term, what do you think we're going to be doing at the cornerback position with definitely Reed being out this week and potentially the next 4 weeks, and Terrion potentially being out for the next couple weeks?
Yeah, I think this week I don't think we need anybody. That's pretty obvious. We're playing Jake Browning. Now, if Joe Burrow was there, I'd be concerned because the elite talent at wide receiver on that team is crazy. And frankly, he could have a great game too and just chuck it up and those guys take it to us. But I think with Amik and with Ya-Sin and the other guys, Branch can step down and play nickel if need be. I think we're okay this week. Looking at the schedule, after that, then we've got the Chiefs who, they're not the Chiefs of years past. They are definitely a team that appears to be on the downward slide. Kelsey is not performing where he used to perform. Their wide receivers are always hit or miss, so we'll see where that goes. But Tampa, if they have injuries, same thing. We may not have to deal with it. But hey, you're talking about the bye week to get healthy.
Yep.
So 4 weeks from now, you could see both Arnold and DJ Reed back in the lineup, especially if Reed does not go on IR. Now, where I do have concern is if there's another injury, whether it's just a short term or whichever to any of our backs. Because if you look at our practice squad, we have Lauren Strickland and Eric Hallett on it, and they're both listed as safeties, but I think they have the ability. Almost everybody on that safety roster that's a backup has the ability to be more of a hybrid. So they could move some folks around, but I do have concern we don't have a natural corner on our practice squad.
Yeah.
So that is a concern. He did not make that move today. He got picked up, actually another really good special teams linebacker to help fill the void with Sailors and Vaki going down and probably being out again this week. So, there's still time to make changes, but there's a deadline Tuesday, I think by 4 to claim practice squad players or make changes. So unless something happens in practice, I don't expect to change this week, and I doubt we'll see any elevations either. But if something does happen, if we lose Ya-Sin, if we lose a Meeks especially, he could make a move, because especially if there's a season ending there's quite a few guys that are available. I don't think we're going to go for any practice squad players unless they're a veteran that's sitting there behind some really good depth on a team, because when you do that, there's a couple things that have to happen. You got to sign them to your active roster, number one, and you have a 3-week commitment to them. So whether you cut them or keep them for that 3 weeks, they count against your 53. So practice squad signings are a little, you think they happen more often, but that's one of the reasons they don't. Unless it's again a vested, veteran that's under that veteran 2+ year rule that allows them to be on there. But outside of that, there's a lot of teams that thought they'd be probably better than they were now at 4 games in. There's quite a few guys available. We've all heard about, Reek Woolen. I think he has the potential in the right system to get back to where he was his first 2 years in the league. When Pete Carroll was let go and they switched defenses, they went from a man-to-man press, they went to more of a zone style, and he's just been lost.
Yep.
He's 6'4", 210, runs a 4.29, 4.25, 40. He's not really a physical guy for being that size.
Not good run supporter. I don't
not
think.
Good run support, not good at, sticking his nose in there. So, he doesn't really fit the mold of what we look for in a cornerback. But he would be an option. I wouldn't be surprised if Pete Carroll went after him, because he's on the last year of his contract and Pete's trying to build something in Las Vegas. He'd be a good person to bring in, sign like a 3 or 4 year deal. He knows what he's going to get out of him. As long as he's there, he's going to perform in his system, ideally. But there's quite a few guys. I did a little research today. If you want to dig around, as far as free agents go, it's busted up or old players. That's what's out there. It's just really, it is week 4 and these guys aren't signed. The only guy that's relatively young is Asante Samuel Jr. He's still sitting out there. But he had an injured shoulder last year. Only played in 4 games. So where he's at, no one knows.
I thought he had neck surgery or something.
Yeah. He's got a small frame too. He's not a big dude. He's 5'10". He's got okay speed, 4.48 roughly. He's serviceable if he's healthy. But right now, who knows where he's at. And then you get into the guys that are veterans that have been hurt, or they're slow. Rasul Douglas played for the Bills.
Oh, wow.
He's a physical press kid. He's 30 years old, 6'2", but he's slow. He runs a 4.6. Don't really like that as your quarterback. Maybe better as a safety, like some of these guys, to prolong his career. But again, unsigned at this point of the year. Stephen Gilmore, excuse me. Same thing.
35.
He was with the Vikings. He's 34, 35. No burst in speed, is way down. He allowed tons of catches, like 65% completion percentage last year, and he's kind of injury prone. Paulson Adebo played for the Saints last. He's 27, 4.4 speed, not bad, 6'1". but he had a broken leg last year in week 7. So who knows where he's at? We know how
Yeah.
long it took Hutch to come back, and I think he broke his in week 5 or 6. So he might be about ready. But who knows where he's at and has he mentally recovered from that? And then the other two guys are James Bradbury and Kendall Fuller, both over 30. They're both, 4-5 guys, but athleticism, speed limitations kind of gotten them down. But I came across one name that I saw and I'm like, interesting.
Uh-oh.
Interesting. Emmanuel Mosley.
Oh, I know that guy. I've heard of him.
Former Detroit Lion Emmanuel Mosley, still only 29, never had great speed, but he knows the system. He tore his knee, 22 and 23.
Yep.
And I don't know what happened to him last year. I think we cut him at the start of the season. He's out there, so if you want somebody to come in that knows your system, that might be the guy.
Is he? Do you feel like he's like healthy and no one's taking a shot at him just because they feel like he's injury prone?
I mean, well, yes to everything you just said.
Yeah.
He's not really been a massive. As we've seen for the 2 years that he was with us, he played 3 snaps one year and like
Jeez.
3 games another.
Snake
4
bit.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he always seemed like he was getting ready to break out, and he was an ideal fit as like that hybrid safety nickel role that Branches kind of was playing after he went down. So just, somebody to think about if they want a familiar face. But again, I don't know what kind of shape he's in. I don't know how healthy he is. I don't even know where he's been. He may have retired and not just filed his paperwork yet. So, so that's it there. And then as far as trade guys go, we already talked about Woolen. He's got some ideal measurables, but I just don't care for the lack of tackling. It's not my guy.
Yeah.
The other 3 guys I noticed, I kind of just cheated a little bit, threw it out there, said, "Hey, find me cornerbacks on teams that are 1-3 or worse that might be might be available via trade," and it spit out Alontae Taylor from the Saints, Garrett Williams of the Cardinals, and Kader Kohu from the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins, I went and looked at them. Their roster, their cornerbacks, you think, with Hill going down, their cornerbacks are even worse. I think they have like 4 guys on IR that's a DB for them. That's a cornerback or nickelback. So,
Jeez.
But they need a wide receiver now. They're signing Cedric Wilson Jr., it appears, off of somebody's practice squad because they're familiar with him. But that's the one position we're kind of flush with, that and maybe running back, So, and conversely, the Saints need a running back. So, that might be the Craig Williams destination. So, but it just seems like the quarterback play
Craig
around
Reynolds?
the league is. I'm sorry, Craig Reynolds. Pardon me. Yes.
Oh, I'd hate to see Netflix go. He's one of my favorite guys. But yeah,
he is.
I think that's actually a good call because I mean, if you're looking at the last few weeks, I mean, Reynolds was always active. He was always active, and I know he was active last week, but I mean, he's not returning balls at all. And Sailors is the guy. Sailors is the guy that comes in third, and they like what Jacob Sailors has to do, and he's absolutely taking away some of Reynolds' snaps. And Reynolds is a player, and so I like that. I like that option. I think, Stephon Gilmore, to me, even though he's 35, to me, there's just something about a veteran savvy guy. If he at the right price, I think another name, Dan, that a lot of people are bringing up. I'm not going to say I want this person because I think he's too expensive. Is Greg Newsome, who we just played for the Browns. Feel like he's a right fit, but right now he's like got a $13 million contract that we would have to take on.
You might as well just take Sauce Gardner off of the Jets' hands at that point. I mean, he played like crap. So, and I was just going to say that a lot of these top tier cornerbacks all of a sudden are just not so top tier this year for whatever reason. Guys that should be playing well, that have historically played well, they're getting woodshedded by guys. sometimes in some cases by guys that aren't even household names.
Right.
They're just playing poorly, and I don't know if it's officiating has changed, and we are seeing a lot more of DPI and holding and things going on, and that's really what's really cost these guys that I think have been allowed to get away with it in years past. They're just the grabbiness is getting called like crazy this year. I've noticed it in my analysis of officials every week when I put together the teams or the preview of the officiating crew for the Lions. It's just it's kind of an epidemic. It seems to be an unspoken or unnamed point of emphasis this year.
Yeah,
Brett?
there were so many flags when I went to the Bucks Jets game last week. That it was the pace of the game is slowed down so much by virtue of the number of penalties, and there were a number of defensive holdings that were called, Dan. And so I think you're onto something. But let's talk about how realistic is it that the Lions are in the market for a cornerback.
One more injury and maybe.
Yep, that's
not
exactly
yet.
Going to go is. I think it's good analysis, and the reality is that the Lions are in a position to where they build depth and players that they have comfort in. I think Rock Ya-Sin's versatility and Aleem, what's his name, the corner slot corner,
Meek Robertson.
Yeah, sorry, Meek. I was going to call him Aleem because I have hopes of Aleem McNeil coming back in my mind here.
Well, he'll be back at practice. That's he's definitely
4-week window.
But the best friend of a secondary is a pass rush. And back in the day when we had the defensive front of Bubba Baker and Doug English and then later, the
Porsche,
Pat Swilling and Porsche and we could put pressure on the quarterback. It made our secondary so much better.
Scoggins.
Yeah,
there we go.
Scroggins. I remember him wiping out a Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback when he turned around and it was like a Mack truck hitting the car.
Yeah. And the secondary became so much better when Ray Crockett and William White and all the guys were in the secondary. And so the Lions secondary is better because of the fact that we've been putting pressure on a quarterback. And I think that's absolutely the imperative here going forward, especially when we play the Chiefs and the Bucks. Baker and Mahomes both are quarterbacks that are pretty nimble in the pocket. They have the ability to kind of scramble and find receivers as plays break down. And so, the key to the game for the Lions secondary in those next 2 weeks after this Bengals game is to contain the quarterback in the pocket, get pressure in their face, which I'm ecstatic about adding Aleem McNeil back to a unit that's already putting a lot of pressure on quarterbacks up the middle. And so if we can keep getting that pressure on the quarterback, that is the best friend of a secondary.
Need to replicate the success that the linebackers had against Lamar Jackson, because that, they didn't want to say they were spying him, but every time he took off, there was a linebacker in hot pursuit that actually had a decent angle and was there to make the play or force him wide, and someone else made the play. So, that's a good point about the two quarterbacks that are up after Browning.
Yeah, and Browning's pretty mobile.
He's mobile, right? He just terrible quarterback, but he's mobile. I mean, so. But
how many times against to your point, Dan, and you bring up a good one there is Anzalone, Campbell, and Barnes all, as plays broke down, they were able to keep Jackson from breaking out. And Lamar was, caught many times. They just kept grabbing my feet, he said. And that was the linebackers primarily. There were a couple times defensive linemen were able to grab a hold of him. But those our linebackers are key to the defense and their ability to run to the ball and make plays.
Make a tackle is key.
Make a tackle. Oh my gosh. Last night's games I was watching, teams are so bad at tackling. The Jets and Dolphins game, watching their poor tackling. The Lions have physical
issues,
fast. linebackers, and I'm so thankful that Barnes is back and healthy, because he adds a whole nother element that was missing. And so, when you can roll these guys out there behind a defensive line that's pretty stout, can put pressure, maintain their gap integrity, and then let the secondary, do what they do. We've got the best safeties in the NFL. And so, again, we're stacked. We do have the possibility here of having to reach out for cornerback depth, but I really am very, very comfortable with the lessons that we learned last year. And Brad Holmes, he's not going to bat an eye. He's not going to flinch one bit. And I guarantee he's got a list of players that if what you just said happens, where we have one more person unfortunately get injured at the cornerback position, then I have no doubt he probably has a plan, and it could include the names that you brought up, except for Emmanuel Mosley. I don't think that guy will be injured.
I knew he had something in his sleeve, and he's like, I do have a guy, and then he paused. I was like, oh God, this feels like a guy.
Yeah, but yeah, Mike Terry posted the summary. Tore his left ACL, tore his left ACL, tore his ACL in his right knee, and torn pec muscle.
I mean, there's so many things. It's covering up Brent's face on the screen right now. That's how long the injury history is. I will tell you this, guys. Let's take all this injury stuff and what we do at cornerback and what we thought we should be doing at defensive end and edge rusher and all these other things. Let's just talk about how incredible Dan Campbell is as a coach. When we thought he let Aaron Glenn got hired by the Jets and Ben Johnson gets hired by the Bears, and we bring in a guy that was on our staff coaching linebackers to be the defensive coordinator, and we bring in a guy who had historically as an offensive coordinator not a good history as an offensive coordinator. Let's call it what it is in terms of John Morton's history out there. And look where we're at. We're confident that he's going to go into all of these games with our starting two cornerbacks potentially both out. And yes, it's the Bengals with Jake Browning, so we don't feel, like it's that big of a deal. But I mean, you just feel confident that Dan Campbell's going to, this is his ship. Right. And these guys understand that this thing is going to get done. It's, talk about Dan Campbell, guys. Let's give him the flowers here, because that game that we just watched against the Browns and the fact that we came out and lost to Green Bay and just won 3 in a row convincingly in 3 different ways. I mean, you just can't understate what a great leader this guy is, and how he's just completely. There is no better coach, in my opinion, for this team, and maybe one of the best coaches right now in the NFL.
For the city, right? Dan Campbell. First of all, Johnny Morton. He unfortunately was the Jets' offensive coordinator, and the players that he was coaching, they pale in comparison to what he is. He's like a kid in a candy store with the players at the skill positions that the Lions have. So that's maybe worth another discussion at some point in the future. But Dan Campbell, his will is going to be the difference in this team, whether we win the Super Bowl this year or not. I've watched the Cowboys special on Netflix, and Jimmy Johnson and Troy Aikman were talking about what a pain in the backside Jimmy Johnson was, and it got harder as the Cowboys won more. It got harder and harder and harder. And the thing that we haven't talked about here that I think is worth noting is that the Dan Campbell coaching lessons learned from last year that I've referred to a few times. Specifically, what I'm talking about is Dan Campbell's will is not going to let these Lions back down. the will that he has, the motivation, the drive, the passion, that's what makes him elite. He is absolutely going to keep the Lions focused this year. Make no mistake about it. There's going to be no letdown. We might lose a game in the course of the season. We might lose a game in the playoffs. Unfortunately, it's a reality in the NFL. There's such a fine line between winning and losing. But I'm here to tell you, it's not going to be because Dan Campbell doesn't have him ready to play. He is doing exactly what Jimmy Johnson did with those Dallas Cowboy teams in those times when they were successful and winning. And that is, we lost to Green Bay. That's not going to happen again. We are not going to lose another football game if I have anything to do about it. And the most motivating thing about the great leaders that I had the opportunity to work with in the military were the people who just never rested on their laurels. They never slept. They never wasted time. They made sure that you were always prepared. And the focus that the units that were the elite units had was incredible. And Mike Terry served in the Navy as well, and he probably would argue the same thing. Dan Campbell is that leader. Dan Campbell, these players and the organization in its entirety would do anything. We always used to joke, run into a machine gun nest in the military. These players would run into a machine gun nest for Dan Campbell, because Dan Campbell has earned their trust, and he was a player. He was a blood and guts player, and we saw that funny interview a few weeks ago of Jared Goff, where the guy says, well, do you support Dan Campbell being on steroids? and the guy says, Jared Goff says, I don't think he's on steroids. And he says, well, do you ever see him work out? And he said, no. And he goes, well, the players love Dan Campbell. They believe in Dan Campbell.
Yeah.
And he has been in the wars.
Yeah.
He has been out there. He wasn't the most athletically gifted player, but these players play hard for him, and they will continue to play hard for him. So I think that's Dan Campbell's greatest attribute, is his leadership ability. Dan, I know you were going to jump in.
Though. Yeah, I gotta agree on everything you said, except I want to take it one step further. I don't think his best attribute is his leadership. I think his best attribute is the fact he knows he doesn't know everything. He knows he needs Brad Holmes. He knows that Brad Holmes, if he asks him for things, Brad will get them for him. They work as a team and they work in harmony. This is the best front office coaching harmonized group in the entire NFL, outside of maybe over in Philly with Russ, Howie, and I can't remember their coaches. But this team here, the reason that everything you just said is true, Brent, is because he also learns from his mistakes. And he asked Brad, I need a team that it can't be top heavy. I need a team that needs to have more balance on depth. We saw it this year, the amount of special teams work that's gone into not only bring in a guy like Grant Stewart, who is a phenomenal special teamer. The guy can play linebacker.
Yeah.
He's not just a
plays
throwaway.
Yeah.
He's a game speed level great linebacker. And, Brad can get these players to Campbell so that way he can throw them in, keep his team fresh, ask him to do those things, rotate him in and out, keep the depth there. You touched on it earlier. These guys kept this team going all last year until we got to the playoffs, and then finally we were overcome by injuries on the D line and somebody not focused when they should have been focused that cost us a game, right? And
you're not talking about any one of our coordinators, are you, Dan?
Benedict Arnold.
Yeah, but you heard Dan Campbell. To Dan's point, Dan Campbell, what did he say? This is on me. We weren't ready to play. This is on me. And that's Dan, that is the true definition of a leader, right?
Yep.
Somebody who's
leadership,
who when you fall short, they accept responsibility. And 100%, the best military leaders and the leaders that I've experienced even in the civilian world are the ones who know that they don't know everything. So absolutely a great point.
This team is better prepared this year for the long haul than we were last year. Last year was about, we had tastes of success the prior 2 years. Last year was a humbling experience because we were expected to win. They expected to win. Everyone expected them to win, and they won. And then when it mattered most, we ran out of steam because we didn't have the horses to keep going. The will was there, but the bodies were not. This year, I feel like unless there's a major rash of injuries, and I'm knocking on wood, I feel like this team is much better prepared. And it touches on exactly what you guys brought up a little bit ago, the versatility of this team. They can win. They can beat any team. They could beat them with defense. They could beat them with ground and pound. They can beat them with quick outs and slants and wide receiver screens and RPOs and speed. They can beat them with the tight ends at the second level. They can beat them by throwing deep to numerous options. There are weapons on this offense at every single position. Brock Wright is a weapon. He is a silent weapon, but he's a weapon. You forget about him, and all of a sudden the dude's torching you for a touchdown for 15 yards, right?
Or you're seeing him block the edge for for a Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown. Yes.
And the defense is the same way. Shepard has taken this team, and outside of that same issue we had with Glenn, where we'd give up touchdowns in that first drive, where you have basically scripted plays against our base, as they're trying to figure each other out. Outside of that, I've been so impressed with Shepard's adjustments in game. He is making necessary changes. He's moving personnel around. They're overcoming some grabbiness and some penalties here and there, but he's getting his players in position to succeed, and he's not sticking with the same thing. We were getting torched in several of those games when we were doing jailbreak blitzes with our linebackers. Well, he dialed it back. He changed up his defense. So that way, when they were expecting it to happen, all of a sudden it's not happening. He tried dropping defensive ends into coverage for about a quarter and realized quickly against the Packers that's not a good idea. So, that didn't really help us out in that game, but he is learning on the fly. He's been, I hate to use the word groomed, but he has been learning at the knee of Aaron Glenn, coming off that Dennis Allen system, which is rooted in the Bill Parcells system. He is learning. He's been being taught and ready to go by Campbell and Glenn over the last 3 years for this moment, and he has shown he's ready to take it on.
Can we just get him to not let up a first drive touchdown for the other team? Can we
I would bet this is the week that does not happen.
I would have bet last week, but guys, we gotta as this thing's flowing around. My job is to keep this thing on the rails, and part of this is I want to talk about this Bengals game. And I understand there's a lot of people that are like, we're going to smash them and all of that. But I think we can get a little bit more, we can think a little bit more about this because of the, quote unquote trap game factors. We're coming off this emotional win. We've got the injured secondary. These guys, this is the best wide receiver duo, in my opinion, in the NFL. I mean, when you have Jamar Chase, who is, probably the number one wide receiver in the NFL, and you got T. Higgins as your number two. This is a road game, so you're going to have that hostile environment. We don't want that letdown, right? And I think we know Dan's going to have them ready, right? But we just watched them just get destroyed by the Broncos on Monday Night Football. Without Burrow, their offensive line can't protect Browning. The running game is not consistent. They don't lean on him frequently enough to take pressure off of Browning. Their passing game is basically like sideline shots to Chase or Higgins, hoping that they win these 50-50 battles. And so, and even then they're getting like tons of penalties. They had, I think it was like 11 or 12 penalties or something on Monday night. So it looks like, and we're favored by like 10 and a half, I think was the line. What do we need to do to make sure that we don't fall backwards? And, this is the NFL, and these guys want to keep their jobs, and they'd like to win. And, what do we need to do, guys? What does our team need to do to make sure? Is it, are we bringing Branch down in, you think, at times, and bringing Maddox in as strong safety? We bring in Branch as a nickelback to help for these DBs. Sort of a lot depends on Terrion in that respect. What do we need to do to make sure that we win on Sunday?
First thing first, everything I said about the Lions and what they have with their roster, it's like the Bengals are the anti of that. They put so much money into 2 wide receivers and a quarterback, and now Trey Hendrickson, who, by the way, who is 31 years old, they don't have good depth. They don't have balance across their roster, so they have holes everywhere. Their running back is, P. Ryan and some other guy, let me see here, Chase Brown, right?
Chase Brown. He's a good running back. Doesn't have guys.
He's a good running back, but he's, is he a stud? Maybe he's a good workhorse. But to answer your question, Chris, here's what we need to do. They're probably going to go into something along the lines of a cover 2. They're going to force Browning, or is that his name? Jake
Browning.
Jake Browning.
Jake Browning. They're going to force Browning to try and beat them. They're going to probably keep 7 in the box with a safety lurking, and they're going to force Browning to try and do drop back passes and hit intermediate routes between the cover 2, between the corners and the safeties, and say, hey, we don't think you could throw these out routes or throw these seam routes because A, you're not going to have enough time because your line is horrid, and B, you aren't accurate. You're not a good quarterback. So they're going to force him to try and beat them over the top with these 2 wide receivers. Now, the Bengals may try and counter with quick screens, wide receiver screens, slants, things like that. But Shepard will adjust. They'll see what the Bengals throw at us that might work. They've got 4 games of offense. I think 2 now with Browning at the helm, plus a part of another one. They know what they have and what they don't have, and they'll be able to attack it. I'm not concerned about it. We might give up 10 points to them, maybe 13. I just, again, they're worse than the Browns with Browning at the helm. I mean, they're looking at the stats right now. They're 30th in the league in total yards per game at passing yards per game at 155. That's their bread and butter. It's not their running game. And, their total yards per game, they're dead last. They average 205 yards a game. I mean, can you imagine when they play the Browns? They might not get 100 yards.
Wow.
So I'm not concerned about them unless they suddenly realize how to play offense or find a way to attack the Lions defense that no one's thought of yet. This isn't Green Bay from the 1990s when we were making backup quarterbacks Pro Bowls and millions of dollars from the Seattle Seahawks. I just don't see it happening.
Well, let me just throw something out there, guys. The Cincinnati Bengals have played arguably 4 of the 4 top 10 defenses to this point. Cleveland, Jacksonville, who has a really good defense, has been playing very well, Minnesota, and Denver. So don't think that the Bengals' ineptness to this point can't take a turn for the better if the Lions don't come ready to play. When you've got Higgins and you've got the Chase and Brown, they could absolutely, every blind squirrel's looking for a nut, right? And Jake Browning could have a career day. So don't, that's still the NFL. I don't disagree with you, Dan, in what you're saying.
They played Cleveland and Jacksonville with Joe Burrow, and they scored 16 and 27. Without Joe Burrow, they scored 10 against Minnesota and 3 against Denver. Yeah, I just, again, they would need to suddenly make him, not him.
Yeah. Hey, make no mistake about it. My prediction is not going to be for the Bengals.
No, I agree.
I'm just saying, it's still the NFL. Any given Sunday.
Yeah, you're correct.
The Browns beat the Packers. The Cowboys stepped up and tied the Packers, and the Packers after week 1 were the greatest team in the NFL.
I'm going to say, after watching the Lions and the Browns, I am not surprised that the Browns beat the Packers. I'm not.
Me either.
I'm not surprised. That is a very tough team. We had a punt return for a touchdown. And there was plays here and there, you know, and two turnovers. Right? And so, you know, if you and their coaches, who their coach is, their quarterback, their quarterback is, you know, and when you play tough teams and you're not ready to play a tough team, and you know, people want to throw dirt at the Browns and say that they suck. They're a tough team. They're a tough, you know, and like if you're not prepared to play a tough team, you're gonna get beat. And so I'm not surprised that
that's my caution, right, Chris? Yeah. That's exactly my caution.
Yeah.
You know, this is where Dan Campbell earns his money. Back to the conversation we were having earlier. Are the Lions ready to play? Do they lay wood?
Yep.
Do they come out and do they play like the Detroit Lions, or do they play down to the level of their competition because they're supposed to win? And when that, just like the Jets in Tampa last week, there's so many examples where good teams play down to the level of their competition, and it ended up biting them in the backside. So we'll find out what we were talking about earlier. Right. If the pedigree is what we believe it to be or not this Sunday.
I will say this: you all have never been in Paycor Stadium or Riverfront before that when the Bengals are not good. The atmosphere is awful. The team, you know, they show up and they start cheering, and then first bad thing that happens, you know, you guys have been to the Lions. You've seen us play back in the 80s and 90s on the off year, not the good year, but the next year we played the first place schedule. We'd be emptying the stadium, you know, Silverdome be leaving by, you know, midway third quarter, right? That's what happens in Cincinnati. So if they catch a whiff that we're starting to pull away, people will bail because they want to get out of downtown and get home, you know, before the crowd and the rush hits. So
go home and get some Skyline chili or whatever they have.
Go watch the Browns lose, you know, and hate watch them instead. I kind of, it's the same thing I said last week. You know, if we score 17 points, it's a win. I said that against the Browns. I say that again this week. And last week we ended up putting up 30 some. You know, it was methodical. It felt like a slugfest. But at the end of the day, you look up and, you know, it was 27 without the special teams touchdown, you know, just offense alone. But, you know, Browning has got a very nasty habit of throwing it to the wrong jersey. Mm-hmm. Guy's been playing 2 games. He's got 5 picks. He's been sacked 7 times. You know, his quarterback rating is 67.9. You know, this is a guy who has 2 of the best wide receivers in the league, and he's averaging 6.0 yards per catch, you know, on his throws, or per throw, you know, on his completions. So conversely, you know, guys like Stafford's at 8.2, Goff's at 7.6. You know, I mean, they're 2 yards ahead of him.
Yeah, I don't think Dan Campbell, Aiden Hutchinson, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch are going to let anything happen, but the Lions are going to absolutely rain some hellfire down on the Bengals on Sunday.
Anyone that's played football before knows you hit them hard, you hit them fast, you make them quit. You get to go home and sit in that bench early and still earn your paycheck.
Lions 38, Bengals 10. That's my call. And you guys want to make a call early for your picks, or
not ready to put my number on it, but I think you're a little light on the Lions points.
Oh yeah, okay, more than 38. Okay,
I'm looking at a 50 too. Spot. I think we're going for our second 50 of the year.
Nice.
I think so too. If you don't put your foot on the pedal and keep it on the pedal, then you run the risk of things not working out the way you want them to. So I think the Lions are going to come out and just.
I think we get our first defensive touchdown this week of the season.
I like it.
Branch to the house.
Okay, Branch. Yeah,
that's pick 6. That's my guess. That's my take it to the bank guess, I guess.
There could be an Aiden sack fumble picked up by a linebacker. I mean, there's so many things that could happen.
We had a strip sack and almost touchdown called back last week by a ridiculously poor defensive holding call, you know?
Yeah.
So the plays are coming. They're there. They're there to be made. And the defense, that's something earlier you mentioned. Defense gets better as the game goes on. Outside of that Packers game, they're playing their best defense by the end of the game. You know, now granted, they probably made them one-dimensional by then, and they're just pinning their ears back. but it's crazy how good this team is when they get rolling and they get deeper into the game.
And if the Lions can stay healthy, this defense is going to be a top five defense by the end of the season.
Well, and Aleem coming
Agreed.
back is going to be huge for us for sure. I mean, just having Aleem back is huge. I mean, Malcolm Rodriguez, right? I mean, listen, having him back is huge. He does so many things. From the linebacker position, fullback, tight end, the dude, special teams, like he plays all over.
We will have too many linebackers on this roster when Rodriguez comes back, that if there's a trade candidate for this team at the deadline and we're looking to fill and strengthen a position, I would think that linebacker with the Rodriguez back, or wide receiver or even running back would be the position that we could draw from to sweeten the pot, or get a player for player swap.
Yeah.
That it just goes back to the depth thing. Our running backs are the strongest they've been in years. Linebacker depth is just incredibly stupid. We've got top tier guys to start, and we have guys that are backups that could be starters or have been starters for other teams. And I'm not talking bottom feeding teams. I'm talking like decent teams.
Yep.
The places where we're thin, DB and offensive tackle, those are the places, and we're thin at tackle. We've still got Big Skip, and Manu has not had to prove himself, thankfully, but yeah, those are the two places I'd say we're thin at this point. I'm okay with Allen at backup quarterback. We've got who's our practice squad quarterback we signed?
CJ Beathard.
Yeah, Beathard. He's fortunately he's been here over 2 weeks now, so he's learned the system. So if we absolutely had to go there, you have competence. The depth is there everywhere except for probably two spots, and one of them is because of injuries right now.
It is
crazy
crazy.
to see how AQM does though. AQM was non-existent.
I think he was hurting.
It's the
last
injury.
week, and they held him back.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So
Snap count was down as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we saw.
In terms of depth, but we still got pressure on the quarterback, right?
Yes.
So that's
Shepard's manufacturing. He tries, you watch the movie Jurassic Park where they talk about the Raptors trying different spots to get out of the cage. That's Shepard. He's out there sending linebackers, safeties, corners, defensive ends, stunts. He's trying stuff the entire game. He's almost like an offensive coordinator. He's setting things up for later, figuring out what's working, what's not working. And then when he goes away from something that, maybe wasn't working perfectly, he brings it out of the blue. And all of a sudden, a running back is not picking up a blitzing Anzalone, and Anzalone is just in some dude's face. It's been kind of marvelous to watch these guys work this year.
Yeah, other than the Packers game, the Lions have really been had some great design in terms of their pressure on the quarterback. And as you talked about, I think it was a spy. I don't think anybody had an issue calling it anything other than that. But
they were joking about that.
Yeah, but the truth of the matter is that he always had one of those linebackers. And if you noticed, when I pointed out earlier, Barnes made tackles, Anzalone made tackles, and then Campbell made tackles, it wasn't the same person every time. They were really mixing it up and
doing their job.
Doing their job, just doing their job, as MCDC loves to say.
And as it should be, they were the top three tacklers on the team. Campbell had 11, Barnes had 7, Anzalone and Arnold had 6. You want your linebackers to be your leading tacklers. You definitely don't want your safeties or your cornerbacks doing it. D-line be nice to have, but those guys' job isn't to do that. Their job is to free it up so those linebackers make plays.
Man, I saw another analysis on our Ohio State defensive tackle. Tyleek is growing up fast. He is a big body. He's nimble. He's like a big dancing bear. His ability to hold his gap. And then, of course, DJ Reader being the pro that he is.
A lot of that stuff doesn't show up on the stat sheet. What those guys are doing.
Stat sheet.
Yep.
Right. But that frees our linebackers up.
Yep.
To run and make plays. And truthfully, Dan, what Dan just said is right. If your linebackers are leading your team in tackles, That is the best indicator of a healthy defense that you'll find. It's that they are running and they are filling those lanes and making tackles. So, all the indicators are pointing favorably. Let's see what the Lions do this Sunday in Cincinnati, and then it's on to much bigger and better opponents those next couple of weeks. So
outstanding. Well, guys, Jake is joining us from YouTube. What up, gentlemen? Love the show. Jake, thanks for joining us. Jake says Jake Browning is obviously awful, but it's the NFL, and I could see them making some notable adjustments that make this closer than 38 to 10. Okay. All right. Hey, listen,
caution.
Jake, we appreciate you. I think the spread is 10.5, and I think Mike was asking earlier, do you take that? Do you take those points? That feels like a lot of points, but I don't know. This is why I don't bet on football, guys.
What if you throw it up to Jamar Chase and T Higgins, one-on-one against the corners?
Arnold isn't out there. You got veterans out there now. You got Robertson and you got Roxanne, two guys that have been around the block. They know to get their head around. They know not to grab, unless they're getting beat deep. But
I'm just saying, you got at least a 50-50 chance with those talented big receivers on the outside. Jake's point, I'm urging caution, guys. I hear you. And
Flacco did that last week, and Kirby fielded like a punt on the sideline for an interception.
What was that arm punt? That was like
it was a route. The receiver broke the route off.
You know what I saw? I had
flashbacks.
I had flashbacks to Jeff Garcia.
Jeff Garcia.
That pass.
I thought you were going to say Ty Detmer.
Garbage. He threw the absolute most worst, awful looking punt pass I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how long ago it was. It was
Joey Harrington did too. I remember Joey Harrington.
Well, Harrington could count every freaking light bulb in the Silverdome. He was on his back so much. That poor guy, he got shell shocked. I hated that for him.
Joey Harrington. This is the only show where you're going to get Pat Swilling, who was up earlier, Joey Harrington, Jeff Garcia, Cherry Garcia showing up on the show. Who knows?
Doug English, Bubba Baker.
Doug English, Bubba Baker.
I got one for you. Ken Fantetti.
Ken Fantetti. What in the world? I might have a football card of him somewhere.
Mike Kofer's another one. Man.
There we
Those
go.
guys.
Okay.
That
George
stretch
Jameson,
of linebackers: George Jameson, Kofer, Fantetti, Spielman, all those guys. That was great. I loved watching football from that era. Every other, it's like, hey, we knew we were gonna suck this year because we're playing a first place schedule. Oh, hey, they threatened to fire Fontes, so we're gonna be in first place this year because he's got a last place schedule.
The big buck.
The big buck. Every other year, you just ping pong back and forth.
Well, for the best, what I'll leave Chris on because I know we gotta run,
here,
but.
yep.
But the thing that killed the 92 Lions was our guards. Our guards. No,
Didn't we have Bill Fralick on that team with his club?
Two young stud guards. No, we had.
You mean Mike the guards Utley that literally were
and
killed?
Eric Andelsek.
Andelsek was killed in his front yard.
We went from 12-4 to 5-11 the next year. And the schedule was part of it, undoubtedly.
Wow.
But our offensive line never recovered from that.
Chris, one last thing before we go, just totally off topic. I'm just going to throw this out there. I was watching some of the videos on TV on X today, and I just want to say, I grew up listening to first Frank Beckman and then Mark Champion on the radio. So many great calls of Mark Champion, calling Barry calls, and then they let him go. He wasn't renewed. We still had Brandstetter and Ortiz, but they let Champion go, and they brought in this guy named Dan Miller, and I don't know who the heck that guy was, right? I just want to say how much and how blessed we are to have Dan Miller as our radio announcer. He is fantastic. The clips watching him, every time I see him call a big play, I get chills. He's the embodiment of it. He loves it so much. His body language, Lomas is over there just cheering in the background,
Him and TJ Lang high-fiving on the other side.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Miller's he's just like, he gets that big charge pump going there. He's just awesome. We are very fortunate to have someone of that caliber that is the voice of the Lions on the radio.
I agree.
And he shows up on shows all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to get Dan Miller on our show, and they do the Fox sports office calls, and we would love to dial into those, Dan, and introduce ourselves to them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think one of the great things I think about some of these play-by-play guys, and there are a handful of them, and you could even look at other sports. Like you look at Ernie Harwell for the Tigers for years, and I just think that guys like Dan Miller are not just voices, right? They understand what's happening. They understand the game, and they understand storytelling. And I think it's important as announcers that you're not just this kind of distinguished voice, doing it. You understand the game. You understand all the nuances of it. And the other cool thing, Dan, that you brought up is like when you watch those videos on YouTube where it's just, they got the camera on the whole crew up there. He's surrounding himself. He's got two guys that flank him on either side, and they're like writing on Post-it notes, where the guy's going for a touchdown and the guy's looking down. He's writing down how many yards it is and how many, and they're holding it up, and he's getting into it, and all of a sudden he looks over at the Post-it note and he goes, "That was 57 yards," because these guys are all. So he surrounds himself with a really great team. Yeah. And speaking of a great team, you guys are a great team. This has been a great show as always. So I'm going to sign off for tonight. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Jake, yes, we are real fans. And thank you for noticing. We're not fake fans. Wanda, we gave you some extra time tonight. Thank you for joining us as always. And ladies and gentlemen, we are the Gray Mains. Like, subscribe, do all the stuff, smash all the buttons, and as always, go Lions.
Bust it outside left. Jameer down to the 10. Jameer to the 5. Jameer to the end zone. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.
Hand off Berry. Surge to the left side. Breaks a tackle. And he will take it in. Touchdown.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. That's what I'm talking about. It is caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions.